In the studio this morning by Robert Kirunda, a lawyer, Don, and a political analyst, alongside Patrick Katabaazi Chichoncho, a member of civil society and a lawyer as well. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Simon.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'll begin with you, Robert. Yeah. What makes this a big affair? Kyadondo East, what makes it a big affair?
I believe that Kyadondo is a big affair for about 3 reasons. One, it is in Buganda, in Kampala, to put it bluntly. Well, we can debate Wakiso, Kampala, and so on, but it is in the central region. And the central region has been a hotbed since '96, and it will remain a hotbed for a very long time. You will remember that in 2016, it was the center of controversy with regard to the voting process. Nearest to the EC, yet materials could not be delivered on time, or more accurately, were not delivered on time. Some believe that was, well, Mr. Kyadondo came and said, oh, we made a few mistakes, we are sorry. Some believe that those were not mistakes, those were the intended actions of the EC. So you have those issues around the geography of where Kyadondo is and what that really means in the context of elections in this country. The second reason is that you have a very interesting race in Kyadondo. Usually you will see NRM versus a political party, DP, FDC.
Two shades.
Two shades. Now you have a landscape that's colored differently. You have NRM versus FDC and all these independents, the most prominent of which is Mr. Kyagulanyi. And that changes things a bit, because you can no longer say there's a block opposition vote or a block FDC vote and there's a block NRM vote. I think that in Kyadondo, more than anywhere else in the by-elections so far, we are going to see a difference in the landscape, and this takes you towards the individual in election politics, where people are no longer voting party ideology, but they are voting the individual.
Is it pointing to a shift in the politics of the day?
No, the shift happened a long time ago. I argued, for instance, concerning the NRM last year, that there really was no NRM. There were people in the NRM. There was no NRM. And the argument, I based that argument on what we saw after the NRM primaries. In about 2 weeks after the primaries, there were 1,800 petitions at the NRM Electoral Commission. Now, if you organize elections across the country as a political party, and virtually 2/3 of your elections are being challenged, then you have a problem. And the EC stopped receiving petitions at 1,000 and they said, don't bring any more petitions. They didn't say there were no more complaints. So that said to me that the political party that you know as NRM, in terms of organizing elections at the grassroots level, is having significant challenges. And one of the contestants who ran in one such primary that was contested and didn't even bother to challenge the election said to me, when I asked him, an elder statesman, I asked him, what went wrong? He said, there's no party called NRM, full stop. That was his assessment after having belonged to this party for over 30 years. So the landscape shifted a long time ago.
Before I get to Patrick, do you think individual merit is back to haunt us?
Not in the way that we understood it pre-2005, but yes, we live in the days of individual merit.
That's the reality.
That's the reality. Now, and you will see that by looking at 2 things. Either the nature of the candidates that have won, this is the one parliament that would have defied the bicameral nature of not bicameral in the sense of having Senate and Congress, but in the sense of having a 2-party system in the House, where you have the left and the right. Because this parliament, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, has more independents than either NRM or opposition. Now, every time you hear NRM leaning independent, that's nonsense. There is no such thing in law as NRM leaning. You are either NRM or you are not. In fact, the moment you say I'm NRM leaning, we can challenge you because
you're here and there.
Because the court has said the moment you cross, there's a problem. And so for the first 4 years in that house, you cannot be NRM leaning. If we come to Chankwanzi, a vigilant voter should be able to throw you out of that house. You see, so that's when you, and those are statistics. When you have a house that is neither mainstream nor opposition, you definitely have a situation of individual merit because the independent is running as an individual. And if he is able to win, or she is able to win, if these people are able to win the election to the point where you almost have a third of parliament, in fact, you have more than a third of parliament in that context, please remember that's the basic quorum to pass a law other than a constitutional amendment. So the individual merit has been here all along. People just didn't realize it. And it is in the NRM, it is in FDC. That's why you have camps in FDC. This is not an NRM problem.
Well, Patrick, what does the Kyadondo East by-election mean to the nation?
Okay, first of all, I'm glad to be appearing alongside my teacher at law school.
Wow.
The Bible says that no student can be better than the teacher, but a student who works hard can be the same as the teacher. So
you know what equals.
Yes, to answer your question, Kyadondo East is very significant for quite a number of reasons. If you have been following the events after 2011 elections, some words such as Benghazi started appearing. So this is a place which provides a shelter, which is the home for the runner-up of the 2001, 2006, 2011, and 2016 elections. And it has been a hotbed, really, of so many activities, including demonstrations, the walk protests, and something like that. So one would actually say that this is otherwise a very, very stronghold for the opposition parties. So to that end, it is very significant. But also, this election, when you look at the results of the previous MP elections, which were disputed, the margin between the winning candidate, Apollo Katinti, and Sitenda Sebaru, was about 300 votes. So you would imagine that this is going to be a very competitive election between the two candidates. But like my colleague has said, you have a very popular musician in the names of Mr. Kyagulanyi, who has appeared and has attracted a lot of enthusiasm with so many people attending his rallies that, in my view, seem to have changed the dynamics to the extent that if you're on the ground, you will notice that there are 3 contending candidates who all of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. And of course, the incumbent, the one who is the MP, who has just been ejected out of parliament, Apollo Katinti, the NRM candidate, and also Mr. Kyagulanyi. So it becomes an election that is hotly contested, something that, in my view, was not imagined, actually, before Mr. Kyagulanyi announced that he was going to. It was something that really looked like it was a clear race for the two candidates.
The two-horse race.
Yes, a two-horse race. But as it is, I see it as a 3-horse race.
Well, Robert, do you feel the influence of President Museveni and Kano Besigye is evidently fading, given the Kyadondo by-election shift? Not
necessarily. Kyadondo, incidentally, this is the first time that you have had a by-election in Kyadondo, as I am sure you are aware. Sitenda Sebalu, in the previous election, went all the way to the Supreme Court. I don't think the constituency has changed. So Kyadondo, naturally, well, perhaps that's too strong. Kyadondo, historically, has been contentious. Now, I think that what you saw yesterday with Mr. Kyagulanyi at a rally, and the news found me working somewhere, and they said, he has said, I think someone on social media said, he has said we don't want to cause a presidential embarrassment. The problem, let's start with the Museveni side. The problem with President Museveni's influence is this. On the grassroots, it is not fading only in Kyadondo. In the central region, that influence has been fading for a while. And to be frank, it was never that strong. That is why
it was cosmetic.
He has not done very well in this part of the country. Elsewhere, fantastic. But here, the demography shows you that he has always had challenges in this part of the country. Now, it doesn't help that his party structures are not working the way they should. It doesn't help that you have all these internal scuffles in the NRM. And the tremors simmer to the surface. That is bad for business. On the Dr. Besigye side, you have the ideological differences in the FDC. I think more than anything else, that is what is undermining his influence. Because
Are they being exposed here?
I think in the beginning of the campaign they were there. You had people saying, is he on the Kantinti side? Is he on the... There were indications that Mr. Muntu, General Muntu was on one side, he was on the other, that the Honorable Nandalama Fabi was, you know, the phasing of those lines is not very helpful. And so what you really have is this, not the struggle for influence, because I believe in Kyadondo, as Patrick has rightly said, being the home area of Dr. Besigye, he would have influence anyway. The question is, where do you throw the weight? And so that's why I think that the challenge that Dr. Besigye is having in Kyadondo is the ideological differences in FDC with regard to how do you choose a candidate, who do you support? Is it a matter of saying, let's just make sure NRM doesn't get the seat, or let's support the party flag bearer? And I think we saw a bit of that in this campaign.
Yeah, but this is a campaign that seems to be pitting more of Museveni, Besigye, and Bobby Wine. Can the country look at Bobby Wine as the new politician on the block?
Bobby Wine represents the kind of people you would call the third force. Because up until his issues in Busabala, I could never have thought that Bobby Wine would throw his hat in the ring. But you see, you have politicians like that who emerge out of the demography of the national terrain, who say, nonsense, and they jump in. Now, if a guy like that jumps in, and like Patrick has said, garners this momentum on round one, you see, it is one thing for you to jump into the ring. You will remember, let me give you an example of 2001. If you were in Kampala in 2001, you probably saw one of those mobs that ran through Kampala saying, Haja Lagidde. I remember, I will never forget that image. We were on Kampala Road and this mob came, Haja Lagidde, Halagidde, Muwebesi Jobulu. If you ever saw that fever, you understood that Uganda's politics had turned. What you are seeing with the Chagulanyis, the Katolubuamas, these are anomalies on the landscape. And the fact that they can sort of jump in, and you all, incidentally, I remember when Katolubuama, the video started going around, when he was saying the Democratic Party, to be a democracy, and everyone was just laughing about it. Guess what? That guy now makes law. So Chagulanyi is that third force that has been orchestrated by circumstances they didn't create, but they find themselves in, and they say, but wait, why not? Now, what you will likely have to see tomorrow, what I think you will see tomorrow is that whichever way the result goes, if Chagulanyi does not win that vote, you are going to have a discontented constituency that says, let's go to court, or something like that. Not because the process will have actually been not free and unfair, and by the way, I really don't expect much in terms of freedom and fairness of that election, but because that is where we are. And people underestimate the growing effect of a sliding terrain. That when you are driving in the mud, when it starts to rain, like this morning it rained, and you wake up and say, my instinct is this, if it is raining, I must get out during the rain. Because after the rain, there's jam. All the taxis come back on the road. So once I hear the rain, as it intensifies, I hurry to get into the car and drive in the rain. Because I know there will be fewer cars, I will drive slower, but I'll get there faster than the guy who comes after the rain. But here is what you notice. As one car goes and another goes, your tires had better be strong, or you better have a four-wheel. Because the terrain starts to get muddy and you skid and the potholes are deeper and things like that. And that's where we are in our national politics, that people underestimated.
We are taking a very quick break, but before we take a break, in just a minute, what does Bobby Wine represent in the political discussion of the country today?
Well, I would personally feel, like my colleague has said, that this is an anomaly really that, in my view, that is happening. And it has been created systematically over time, simply because our politicians, members of parliament and the like, have not been able to educate the population or the voters on what exactly are their roles. So you find progressively we are having a society that is actually evaluating the performance of an MP on very wrong indicators. So you find somebody has come, he has promised a road, the road has not been made in the time he has been a member of parliament, they have promised water, they have promised ABCD, and as a result, somebody comes and says, you know, because so and so. That he's now the one who is going to take care of the business because the other one has failed. And after 5 years, the same guy will face the same hit, and people will say, you told us that you are going to do what this guy had failed, and you have also failed. So for me, there's been a widening disconnect between leaders and the population, and they have created gaps. And some people have started coming up to occupy those gaps. And I'm very sure that for people who are so enthusiastic, for instance, about Mr. Kyagulanyi, do not want even to know what a role of an MP is going to be.
They are not trying to know.
Well, we're going to take a very quick break. When we return, we'll still be looking at the undercurrents in Kyadondo East by-election. Tomorrow, the voters will be walking to the polls. A very interesting episode in a process that's been characterized by drama, some incidents of violence and tension. We'll return after the break. Come back. You're still watching The Morning Breeze in this segment of the topical discussion. My name is Simon Kagwanjala, looking at the undercurrents in the Kyadondo East by-elections and how they shape the political conversation in and around the country. But before we get back with our guests, let's touch base with Samson Kasumba, who is on the ground to give us a further look and feel of the constituency. Samson?
Yes, Simon, if 24 hours have ever made a difference, then they have made a difference here in Kasangati. At this time yesterday, there was so much activity. This place was buzzing with news. But at the moment, it is all quiet. This one will go to Dr. Kizza Besigye's house. We'll proceed on to Matuga. The one in front of me is the one that will go through to Chira, over the direction. Yesterday there was police vehicles ferrying Robert Kyagulanyi that direction. Then down south you'll be heading towards Gayaza all through to Manyangwa, and you can connect to Mukono that direction. But at the moment Kasangati is back to normal business, quiet, the border doing their businesses, nothing really so much to make the news, especially knowing that news is generally about controversy. There's no controversy here, even if you were to look for one. Simon?
Well, thank you very much. We look forward to more updates coming from Kyadondo East. It seems to be very interesting. I want to come back to the studio with these gentlemen to give us the analysis. Well, normally, by-elections have been affected by voter apathy. Normally rooted in voter apathy. Do we see this coming this time?
Kyadondo, I think, might be different. And there are two factors for that. One is the temperatures in the race. I agree with Patrick entirely. It's a three-horse race. You rarely have apathy in a three-horse race. But also, too, the nature of this other third force, Mr. Kyagulanyi. People want to come and see this musician turned politician. If I had been his advisor, I would have told him to leave his hair alone. That hair would have won him the election. But the third reason that I think there will not be apathy is because of what we saw yesterday. Whoever ordered that arrest, in my view, made a tactical blunder. And if I had been in NRM camp, I'd have told them, leave the man alone.
Why from NRM camp?
Because I think that if the person who had complained about where Kyagulanyi was had not been NRM, there would have been no arrest. If the issue was that Kantinti is in the same place as Kyagulanyi, there would have been no arrest. But I could be wrong. Now, the moment you pick him up, everyone said, welcome to politics. That's the way it's done. Even those ones in Kyadondo were saying, in fact, someone on Facebook said they just handed the guy his victory. Because those things, remember we're dealing with the frustrated population, people are angry, people are upset, people have to channel their emotions somewhere. Now when they channel the emotions in a situation like that, they channel them against the system. And sometimes that means go out and vote. But it also depends on how much candidates can persuade their constituents to go and vote. It is not unlikely that you will see huge crowds and not see an election victory. That has been one of the problems with the Besigye phenomenon.
We'll get into crowd politics, but what do you make of voter apathy that has been quite typical in by-elections, even in major elections?
No, I would want to agree really with my colleague, because when the competition is very stiff, it means that each and every participant would go out of their way to ensure that they get as many people as possible to vote. And in the process, you have voter education coming on board. And I want us to acknowledge that this is an election that is a must-win for NRM, for the reasons being that they narrowly missed it last time. This is also an election that is a must-win for FDC, because, as a matter of fact, what we would call the incumbent is an FDC candidate. And for supporters of Mr. Kyagulanyi and himself, I think they think this is a must-win for them, because if they don't win this time, they might get some challenges in some years to come in respect to their likely success.
So the stakes are high.
So the stakes are higher.
Very high.
And when the stakes are very high, as we have described them, then the higher the stakes, the more likely it is to be translated to
The ballot.
the voters themselves, because it will enchant the voters, to get them excited. Mobilization, you have heard about the report from SEDU saying that there have been more of door-to-door campaigns than open rallies. And in my view, that door-to-door campaign translates into voter education in one way or the other. So you will not have so many...
Actually, it has been said that that door-to-door strategy is exactly why the Honorable Kyadondo Chikubo keeps winning. Because what he does is he goes to the constituency and goes to the voter and says, I have come to you, Simon, please give me your vote. So by the time he goes to the rally, people know him and they can relate. Now, when a flamboyant person, not flamboyant, but when someone as affable as Robert Kyagulanyi comes to your home, it leaves a memory, especially if you've been in this constituency voting for the last 15 or 20 years, and no one has ever come to your door. So people will remember.
Can't he also employ the same strategy?
Yeah, but did he do this in the previous election?
Probably yes.
So people will remember those things and they will come out and vote. And I think that the other reason why you might not see as low apathy is that curiosity. People will just come and say, let's go and see what will happen. Then you get there and say, yeah, we're known that. Then after you vote, you say, let me wait.
Let's get some breadth on crowd politics and what it means for the country. On a working day, you see hordes and hordes of people. I don't know whether they are voters, but so many people turning up at a rally. What does it suggest?
The demography of the people you will see are mostly youth and women. Now, that to me suggests two or three things. One, that as we all know, you have a very high unemployment rate. During the presidential campaign, my office is not too far from here. And every time there was a rally at the Kololo airstrip, we were damn inconvenienced. Because you wonder, when do these people work? Don't they have other things to do? And you saw crowds at these rallies, and sometimes you saw the same faces, the same machinery. And so you have the question of, are they just too loyal to their candidates, or are they unemployed, or are they gainfully unemployed? And that doesn't mean in the formal sector. That could also mean in the informal sector. Because I don't think that a woman will leave her stall to go to a rally and do so 3 times in a week. Because then your business will go down. Especially if the rally is in your home area, because then what it means, you should go to the stall and sell. People get hungry, so you sell the bananas and they eat. Now, that means to me that you have it's just a way of displaying the unemployment. It also means that you may have certain levels of interest in the election for different reasons. People may be coming to get money because our elections really, money answers all things. They may be coming to hear this candidate, which I think may have been the case with some of Robert Chagulanyi's rallies, to say, is he really a politician? What does he really have to say? So people come. You may also see the crowds.
He severally said he's not a politician. He's a leader.
And so you have that interesting nuance but can you lead without politics? And that piques the intrigue in people to say, let me go and find out. The people of the scriptures say, Jesus was calling disciples, said, you come. Then another said, come and see this man. I found him of Nazareth. Really? Hey, come see for yourself. Can anything will come from Nazareth? You come and see. So the come and see effect plays into those crowds. The question is, can you translate those crowds into votes? Interestingly, the difference this time might be that more people have national IDs than before because of the debacle that we saw not too long ago of stampeding people to go and register for their SIM cards and whatever. So you have more national IDs, and we know that since 2016 you now can't vote with your national ID. So you might as well use it. And so that might change things up a bit. I watched the presser yesterday by the chairperson of the EC, the Honorable Justice Byabakama, when he was saying the register is now at 70-something thousand. And so interestingly, we watch the numbers to see whether there will be any shift between the numbers of the first election and the by-election, because that will tell us whether the national ID is working or not.
It's now over 70,000.
It's now over 70,000. But the question is, what was the first number? So that's where you need to see. And by the way, those numbers are important because the best way they will rig you out of an election is using that register. Let no one ever lie to you. The best way they will rig you out is using that register.
Patrick, can we look at the role of some of the key stakeholders here? I want to hear your evaluation on the Electoral Commission. This election was overturned simply because EC never did its job. Is there any semblance, probably, that EC could have learnt a lesson and corrected their act?
Okay, before I answer your question, I'm reliably informed that the previous number was 40,000, was about 40,000. So if we have 70,000 voters, it means that we have an additional 30,000 new voters. And those will be the voters to watch for, and they can twist or turn the election the other way. Now, if you have observed by elections, you'll notice that the whole of the headquarter of Electoral Commission shifts into that area where they're holding a by-election. So you have the chairman there, you have all the commissioners there, you have all the senior persons at the Electoral Commission there. It is true, it keeps the district returning officer in charge. He will still be the one to announce the results, but the heavy presence of the people from the head office matters a lot in this election. There are three things that normally happen. The chairman and the commissioners are divided in two groups. If, for instance, a constituency has administrative units such as sub-counties, they divide themselves to oversee in some of these different places. And then you have the other officers, again, supervising now quite a number of polling stations. So you are likely to have, in my view, a better election.
On the day?
On the day, yes.
But prior,
yes,
do you feel the Electoral Commission has played its role?
You have had a report from SEDU, which has highlighted a number of flaws, some of which include having rallies past the required time. So there are some of the flaws that are coming in. But by and large, since we have not seen any major controversy that is emanating from Electoral Commission, I have a very strong feeling that they so far have tried to do their role. What we expect them to do, largely in my view, is tomorrow to ensure that all polling materials arrive on time, that voting generally starts on time, and that results are announced at the polling station and transmitted to the tallying center on time. We have had problems before. There's a by-election that I didn't participate in as a candidate, but at least I was part and parcel of the processes where, that was in 2011, where results from a certain sub-county the results were delayed by something like 3 hours. And turned out that actually those results overturned a huge margin that had been garnered by one of the candidates. And the other stories that followed thereafter was not a nice story, at least for the person who lost the elections. So if they can guarantee that the ballot papers and other polling materials, deployment of officers is spot on, it is done at the right time, and we have voting closing at the right time, and we have all the results transmitted to the tally center at the right time, I'm sure we'll have a very good election, at least for the tallying of numbers. But if there are some other challenges that Sedo has highlighted, like bribery, like what, that will be a story for another day. But for us, if we are to indict electoral commission, particularly on the polling day, they must ensure that everything happens on time.
Robert, it's now Justice Byamukama in charge. Do you feel his impact yet?
I think,
or Chigundu is still having a legacy there?
you know, the late Maya Angelou is famous for having said that people forget what you did. They never forget how you made them feel. The Chigundu effect, I don't think will go away until after 2021. Because the general election is a big affair. It's a national affair. And the sentiments that people form over a 6 months period. You can't undo that. And remember, the Chigundu effect has also been, it was also in part because he was a two-term chairperson. So people had gotten used, he evolved from, we have survived Kasuja against, to, now people make memes about him. I saw one at Idi, concerning Idi, when they're saying, let them not lie to you, Idi is on Monday. And it had Chigundu's face on it. People don't do that just because they want to have fun. People do that because there's a lingering effect. And I pity my Lord Justice Byamukama because he steps into those shoes and he has that image to clean up. Now, it's easy to start with a by-election because it's not the whole country, it's just one constituency. So you can descend upon it and bring power and might. And things will perhaps go well. I personally don't have very high hopes because of the nature of the constituency. When you are in Amuru or in Pakwach or wherever, things can go well and people will tell a rosy picture. When you're in Kampala and there are people whose structures are set up a certain way, that's a different thing. We wait and see. I really am looking forward to being proved wrong. But unfortunately, I think that
Did
because
Byamukama fit in big shoes or torn shoes?
No, I think he was dealt a very untidy hand. I wouldn't have wanted to be the person who takes on that seat after the 2016 election. Because I doubt that any right-thinking member of this country went to bed and said, thank God 2016 is over. What an election, it was wonderful. I don't think that Mr. Chigundu himself sits there and says, I did my job perfectly well. I'll give myself 100%.
He's come here and boasted that it was a beautiful experience for him.
I wonder if that's what he says to himself in the silence of the night. When the conversation is between you and those of us who believe in the Bible know this verse in Psalm 16 where it says, you instruct me in the night rains. You counsel me in the night rains. When you're communing with your God and you're saying, hey, what about this, what about that? I wonder if that's the conversation he has with his creator. You know, I seriously doubt that because he would never have apologized in the Supreme Court as he did. I mean, that is the Supreme Court before a bench of 9. You go and say, yeah, we made some mistakes. You should have seen the justices. I think you have the footage. Take another look at it and tell me if he's contented.
With the Chigundu effect still lingering, and Kakoza Mutale is in the race as well, plus, of course, the presidency, what bearing could this have on Kyadondo East by-election?
I've been trying to read in between the lines. And I have observed President Museveni for a long time, particularly in the manner that he handles elections, where he has candidates for NRM and independents. And I can assure you, the president would rather have an independent candidate than having an FDC candidate win, particularly in a constituency such as that one. So, and I would be shocked if actually I discover that no attempts have been made to actually look at Sitenda Sebaro NRM and also look at Kyagulanyi, the independent candidate. I would be very much surprised because in my own understanding, that's how really these things work.
That's his preference.
For me, that's how these things work. So for me, the president had to come there because he's the chairperson, he's the chairman of the party that has a candidate. So he has to be there to ensure that actually he delivers victory for the NRM party.
Has he in a way exerted the presidency onto the people?
But I have a very strong feeling, a very, very strong feeling that the kind of force and pressure that we normally see in other elections, I don't think it is the same pressure that we are seeing in Kyadondo. In my view, I don't think it is. Well, it is still too early to tell because we still have a day and we have tomorrow and we shall see.
Do you think President Museveni is very keen to trounce Besigye in his hood?
I am very sure, very, 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 very sure that if NRM can't have Sitenda Sebalo as an MP, they would rather have an independent candidate becoming an MP ahead of an FDC candidate. That one, I'm very sure.
Hypothetically asking, and this is my final question before we sign out, what if Besigye loses this? Because it's more of Besigye versus Museveni in his backyard.
And I think it is a very, very likely scenario. To be frank, I actually doubt that. I think the election is for Robert Kyagulanyi to lose. It's not for him to win. It's not for Kantindi to win. I agree with my land friend that the NRM will do anything they can to make sure that either they win or FDC loses. And that leaves Kyagulanyi Kyagulanyi, I think, is one of those what I call accidents.
So is NRM seeking to humiliate Besigye in his backyard?
Wouldn't you? That's just natural. That is just natural. That's the way politics works. That if I come to your backyard and I beat you, I get boasting rights. I can't get to go and say, he doesn't even have support in his own home. You remember how much a big deal it was when people said, but people at a polling station at a certain place in Nakasero, or to be blunt, at State House Nakasero, voted more in this way than in the other way. And that makes news.
Or policemen.
Or policemen, or the military. And you've seen what happened after the 2016 elections with regard to the forces. So these things are natural.
Can Besigye do anything to salvage his win, to consolidate his maybe?
At this stage, I doubt that he can. I think what he should have done was to broker an understanding between Kyagulanyi and Kantindi. If he had had one of those, he would have consolidated the win very well. But it doesn't augur well that he let the two horses out on the racetrack, and now one of them seems to be giving his own horse a race for their money.
Is Kyagulanyi more of opposition than NRM, or more inclined towards NRM than the opposition?
I think he is actually a young man who is yet to find his way.
Sure. I have the same feel because, and this is why I say so, when we had elections, we had the musicians divided. Yeah. Some went for Tubonganawe. He was nowhere. Yeah. He remained in the middle. He didn't campaign for anyone specifically. Well, he appeared to play the guitar for Besigye at his home, but
that's no guarantee.
But to be frank, I don't think that he was on either side.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. That's all we had time for this morning on the Morning Breeze. Robert Kirunda and Patrick Katabaazi Chichoncho sharing their insights on what Kyadondo East means in the bigger picture. Thank you.